Beneath the quiet hum of modern cities, under the stone foundations of forgotten temples, and far below the soft sediment of oceans, there lingers a question that unsettles both history and imagination. What if the greatest civilization humanity has ever known lies hidden beneath our feet? Not the ruins we celebrate in textbooks, not the monuments tourists marvel at, but something older, deeper, veiled by layers of earth and silence. Geological shifts erase landscapes, oceans rise and fall, ice swallows continents. Whole chapters of our past may have been buried, leaving only hints that appear like whispers in myth, fragments in scripture, or inexplicable anomalies in stone. Legends of Atlantis, the submerged temples off the coast of India, and the enigma of Göbekli Tepe all press against the same uneasy thought, that what we call the dawn of civilization may not be a beginning at all, but a return. Each unearthed fragment suggests the possibility of memory older than memory, an inheritance sealed away beneath strata of time. Science speaks of tectonic plates and sedimentary ages, yet the possibility remains that entire histories sleep beneath those layers, waiting for the rare crack in the earth to breathe them back into human sight. Perhaps the soil we walk on is not merely ground, but a palimpsest, concealing the rise and collapse of something far greater than what has been written. And perhaps what has been hidden is not lost, but deliberately covered, as if the earth itself were safeguarding a truth too vast, too disquieting to be told in daylight. Welcome to ARCHAEON. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now. I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. Shadows move quietly across the memory of the earth, as if each layer of soil carries a secret pressed into silence. When fragments of stone appear in places they should not belong, when patterns of architecture rise suddenly from the dust without ancestors to explain them, a question ripples through the human mind. What if our history is not a steady climb, but a cycle of rise and collapse, with entire epochs erased beneath our steps? The accepted timeline of civilization places the birth of complex societies in Mesopotamia, in the Nile Valley, along the Indus, and in the river plains of China. Yet here and there, threads unravel. A monolith found beneath the sea, carvings on walls older than written language, astronomical alignments etched into stones long before conventional calendars. These signs seem to whisper that humanity has awakened before, only to fall back into silence. Consider Göbekli Tepe, a site in southeastern Turkey that reshaped the imagination of archaeologists when it was unearthed 12,000 years ago, long before agriculture was thought to exist, long before organized religion was considered possible. Massive T-shaped pillars were raised and aligned with precision. Each stone bears carvings of animals and symbols, images that may be fragments of a language or a code beyond translation. What hunter-gatherer society, moving constantly with the seasons, could have anchored itself long enough to construct such a sanctuary? To place so much weight on the earth, and to carve it with images that hint at cosmology? Göbekli Tepe does not answer. It unsettles. It opens a gap between what textbooks suggest and what stones insist upon. The anomaly deepens when these stones are compared with myths carried across continents. Flood legends, Stories of a world reset appear in Sumerian tablets, in the Hebrew Bible, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, in the traditions of indigenous peoples from Australia to the Americas. Each tale speaks of waters rising, of destruction, and of a few who carried fragments of knowledge into the new world. Geological evidence tells of massive floods as the last ice age receded, when glaciers collapsed and seas swallowed coastlines. Could it be that the myths were not exaggerations, but remembrances of something vast, a memory encoded in story because stone could not survive the depths? Beneath the waves of the Indian Ocean, off the coast of Dwarka in Gujarat, ruins of temples and streets have been discovered, dated by some to more than 9,000 years ago, pushing against the boundaries of accepted history. A city submerged, remembered in epic poetry, now half buried beneath sand and coral, as though the ocean itself carried its own archaeology. If one listens closely, these scattered voices seem to converge. The Nazca lines stretching across the Peruvian desert, visible only from the sky, echo with the same enigma as the megalithic walls of Sacsayhuaman, where stones weighing hundreds of tons interlock with such precision that even a blade cannot pass between them. In Baalbek, Lebanon, 3 colossal stones known as the Trilithon rest in place, each weighing over 800 tons. No written record explains their movement. No known technology of the time accounts for their placement. Some say levers and manpower could suffice. Others whisper of lost methods, forgotten sciences, or perhaps knowledge inherited from a civilization that did not survive. The argument circles endlessly, but the stones remain, indifferent to interpretation, their weight pressing into the earth like a silence too heavy to break. The deeper one follows these anomalies, the more the official narrative appears less like a definitive story and more like a fragile framework, patched together by fragments that happened to survive. What of the fragments that did not? Sediment, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, rising seas, all serve as erasers of memory. Beneath the Mediterranean, remnants of ancient ports lie drowned. Beneath Central America's jungles, entire cities sleep under roots and vines, their pyramids only now being traced by LiDAR. If forests can swallow stone in centuries, what might millennia erase? And if millennia can erase, what of tens of millennia? Could civilizations have flourished not once, but several times, each cycle extinguished, leaving only rumors in myth, only puzzles in stone? The opposition to such thoughts is immediate, firm, grounded in reason. Archaeology depends on material evidence, and without a chain of tools, pottery, and skeletons, civilization cannot be acknowledged. The absence of proof becomes proof of absence. And yet, there is something fragile in such certainty, for absence may also be the mark of success in concealment. How many relics lie buried in places we have not yet pierced? The ocean covers more than 70% of the planet, most of it uncharted, most of it hidden in pressure and darkness. Could it not cradle forgotten cities in silence? Could the earth, constantly shifting and swallowing, not have layered entire cultures deep within itself, beyond the reach of spades and scanners? Scientists of the 19th century once scoffed at the possibility of ancient cities beneath jungles. Yet now, Angkor Wat and its sprawling companions remind us how vast civilizations can vanish into greenery. Once, the idea of continents shifting was dismissed. Plate tectonics is now elementary. Once, the concept of meteors striking the Earth seemed absurd. Now craters mark the scars of planetary memory. What then of civilizations, their stones swallowed by Earth, their echoes preserved only in myth? Could it be that what we dismiss today as speculation will, tomorrow, be revealed as a missing chapter of our story? The cycle of forgetting and remembering seems to haunt human history itself. Each time fragments surface, they do not complete the puzzle, but enlarge the void. The Antikythera mechanism, pulled from a shipwreck off a Greek island, revealed gears of astonishing complexity, suggesting knowledge of astronomy and engineering not attributed to its time. It appears as an orphan of history, an artifact without ancestors or descendants. One can almost imagine a greater library of mechanisms lost to salt and time, each one dismantled by waves, each one a voice silenced before it could sing. Similarly, ancient maps, such as the Peary Race chart, display coastlines of Antarctica free of ice, a sight not visible for thousands of years. Scholars debate the accuracy, the possibility of copying from older sources, yet the question lingers. What cartographers were drawing these coastlines long before modern exploration? Each of these signs, isolated, may be dismissed, but together they weave an unsettling suggestion that humanity may not be the first to rise to complexity, but the first to rise after forgetting. Perhaps the soil beneath our cities is not merely earth, but a palimpsest of civilizations erased, written over, and erased again. In such a vision, time is not linear, but circular, with knowledge ascending and falling like waves. The ancients spoke often of golden ages, of times when gods walked among mortals, when knowledge was pure and unbroken. Modern scholarship calls these myths, yet one wonders if myth is simply the shape of memory once it has been worn down by centuries. As silence deepens, so does the question. Are we the pinnacle of human achievement, or merely another layer in a cycle destined to collapse? When one stands before the unyielding stones of forgotten builders, when one looks at a coastline drowned beneath rising seas, the certainty of our place begins to tremble. If the greatest civilization on earth truly lies hidden beneath us, then our knowledge is not a crown, but a shadow of what has been lost. And if what has been lost is greater than what we hold, then every discovery is not a revelation, but a reminder of absence. Somewhere, deep in the soil or silent under the ocean, something waits, not to be found, but to be remembered. The night carries that question like a slow tide, and the mind drifts with it. What stories lie beneath the soles of our feet, beneath the concrete and the rivers, beneath the mountains and the sand? What voices still whisper in the dark, unheard, because we no longer know how to listen? And if one day the earth shifts just enough, cracks just wide enough, perhaps the silence will break, and the shadows of that buried greatness will rise again, not as myth, but as memory. There are places on this planet where silence feels heavier than stone, as if the earth itself is guarding something it does not wish to yield. The weight of forgotten ages lingers most powerfully in landscapes where myth and geology overlap, where the terrain speaks in riddles that science translates only in fragments. One such place is the plateau of Giza, where the pyramids rise against the horizon like frozen waves of time. The mainstream view sees them as tombs, built in the age of the pharaohs, with tools of copper and armies of workers who lifted block upon block under the desert sun. Yet cracks appear in this narrative when the stones themselves are read not only as monuments, but as silent witnesses of the sky. The alignment of the pyramids with Orion's belt, precise in an age before telescopes, raises a question. Why anchor so much weight to the heavens, unless knowledge far older than Egypt whispered its geometry into the minds of builders? Beneath the Sphinx, with its eroded body scarred by rain that fell thousands of years before the desert hardened, geologists have argued about timelines. The official history places the carving of this colossal guardian at around 2500 BCE. But the marks on its body, deep vertical fissures smoothed by water, suggest rainfall that last touched the plateau over 10,000 years ago. If that is true, then the Sphinx is not a creation of pharaohs, but an inheritance from a forgotten time, a survivor of a world washed away. This idea, first raised by scholars like R.A. Schwaller de Lubitsch and later echoed by geologists such as Robert Schoch, has been dismissed by many, yet it refuses to fade. The stone itself holds its silence, indifferent to the disputes of human academics, eroded by time, yet still standing like a riddle no one can fully answer. The enigma stretches beyond Egypt. Off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, beneath the shifting waves of the East China Sea, vast stone structures rise from the seabed, terraces, steps, and avenues carved with angles that suggest design rather than accident. Some claim it is natural geology, a coincidence of fractured sandstone. Others point to deliberate chiseling, to corridors and pillars too precise to be random. If human hands shaped Yonaguni, then it lies at least 10,000 years old, drowned when seas rose at the end of the last ice age. In that case, the site would not only predate written history, but would rewrite it, offering evidence of an advanced culture drowned and forgotten. The ocean itself becomes the archive, its silence holding more than any library. Patterns begin to emerge across continents, as though pieces of a larger story were scattered deliberately, like shards of glass from a single shattered vessel. The flood myths that ripple through cultures become less like allegory and more like memory, an inheritance carried in story when stone and city were swallowed. The Epic of Gilgamesh tells of a deluge sent to erase mankind. The Popol Vuh of the Maya recounts cycles of creation and destruction, worlds born and destroyed until the present one emerged. Even Plato's tale of Atlantis, often dismissed as allegory, fits uneasily with geological evidence of abrupt climate shifts around 11,600 years ago. The very moment ice sheets collapsed, seas rose, and coastlines were erased. Was Atlantis merely a moral parable, or was Plato repeating fragments of a memory passed down from travelers who glimpsed ruins already ancient in their time? The deeper the investigation, the more it feels as if the earth itself carries memory not in books, but in strata. Consider the Black Sea. Geological studies reveal that around 5600 BCE, rising waters from the Mediterranean surged through the Bosporus, flooding a freshwater lake and transforming it into the Black Sea. Villages along its shores would have been drowned suddenly, a catastrophe remembered in stories of deluge. If one looks at myth as coded memory, then perhaps each flood story is not a metaphor, but an echo of lived experience, preserved not in ruins but in words. In that light, human civilization is not merely 5,000 or 6,000 years old, but stretches back into a mist of cycles, each one ending in water, fire, or silence. The opposition to such interpretations is strong. Archaeologists insist on the rigor of context, the necessity of artifacts linked in sequence, the need for a continuous record. And yet, the silence of oceans and the violence of tectonic shifts destroy continuity. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. What remains unsettled is the discomforting thought. What if the gaps in our record are not random, but systemic? What if each collapse of climate, each shift of sea, served not only as a natural catastrophe, but as a veil covering something humanity was not meant to carry forward intact? One might imagine this silence as intentional. Many traditions speak not only of destruction, but of concealment, knowledge given, then withdrawn. In the Book of Enoch, the Watchers descend to teach forbidden sciences, then are condemned. In Mesopotamian lore, the Apkallu emerge from the waters to impart wisdom, only to return when their time ends. In Hindu tradition, vast yugas cycle through ages of light and darkness, with knowledge waxing and waning as humanity rises and falls. If these myths hold fragments of truth, then perhaps what lies beneath us is not only civilization, but memory withheld until a cycle turns. The earth itself may be the custodian of that silence, its strata a script too immense for one epoch to read. When viewed from this perspective, anomalies such as megaliths, lost maps, and drowned cities cease to be curiosities and begin to look like signposts. The Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513, carries coastlines of South America and Antarctica with a precision difficult to explain without access to sources long before Columbus. Could it be that this map was a copy of a copy, a chain of transmission stretching back to an age when coastlines looked different, when ice sheets were not yet locked? The map becomes not merely an artifact, but a memory, a shadow of knowledge so old that even those who drew it did not fully understand what they carried. In such a vision, human history becomes a labyrinth of forgetting and remembering. Each age inherits fragments from the one before, distorted through catastrophe, myth, and silence. The pyramids may not simply be Egyptian tombs, but echoes of an older design, passed through memory until new hands could shape stone again. The drowned city of Dwarka may not simply be a legend, but a fragment of an older coastal civilization erased by seas. Yonaguni may not simply be geology, but the trace of builders whose names the ocean has erased. And the Sphinx, scarred by rains long vanished, may not simply be a guardian of pharaohs, but of ages themselves. The thought unsettles because it shifts the foundation of our certainty. If what lies beneath us is greater than what stands above, then all we know is provisional, fragile, a shadow of a vaster story. Perhaps civilization is not the crown of human achievement, but merely the latest bloom of an ancient root system that stretches deep beneath the soil. What if our cities, our science, our fragile certainty of progress are only another cycle, destined to fall into silence, to be remembered in myth when the next age begins? The night deepens, and the earth feels heavier, as if it holds more than weight, as if it cradles memory itself. One can almost imagine the ocean withdrawing, revealing stone avenues and pillars glistening in the sun, ruins that do not belong to our world, but to one we barely remember. And in that silence, a question waits, not to be answered, but to be carried forward like a secret too vast for one lifetime. What if we are not the first, nor the last, but only a single breath in the long respiration of civilizations rising and collapsing, hidden and revealed, forgotten and remembered. There is a rhythm to the earth's silence, a pulse that seems to beat beneath stone and water, drawing attention not to what is seen but to what is absent. Each ruin that rises from the soil is accompanied by countless ruins still buried, each uncovered truth overshadowed by what remains hidden. It is in this contrast, between the known and the unknowable, that the weight of mystery settles. Some fragments surface like a dream half remembered, and when examined closely they reveal not answers, but deeper questions. The great mystery of Puma Punku in Bolivia is one such fragment. On the high plateau of the Andes, over 12,000 feet above sea level, lie massive blocks of andesite and red sandstone scattered like pieces of a puzzle abandoned mid-construction. Some weigh over 100 tons, yet their edges are cut with precision so exact that modern stonemasons marvel at them. Perfect right angles, drilled holes, and interlocking joints suggest an understanding of geometry and technology that should not have existed in the pre-Columbian world. Mainstream archaeology attributes these feats to the Tiwanaku culture, but the dating is ambiguous, and the techniques remain unexplained. Were the blocks cut with tools of stone and bronze, or do they point to a forgotten mastery now erased? Puma Punku seems less like a ruin and more like a reminder that there are chapters of human ingenuity missing, pages torn from the book of history. The strangeness is not confined to the Andes. Across the globe, in the Mediterranean, lies Malta, where megalithic temples older than Stonehenge still stand. Gigantic limestone blocks, stacked and aligned, form structures that seem to echo a cosmological order. The hypogam of Hal Saflieni, carved into limestone beneath the earth, contains chambers where acoustics resonate with uncanny depth, amplifying sound in ways that stir both body and mind. Some researchers suggest that the hypogam's design was deliberate, constructed to create altered states of consciousness through vibration and resonance. If so, then its builders possessed not only architectural skill, but an understanding of sound as a force, a knowledge that would not resurface openly until modern acoustic science. Who were these builders? How did they vanish so completely that only their stone echoes remain? When such anomalies are placed side by side, the illusion of continuity in our historical narrative weakens. Archaeology often presents civilization as a steady ascent: hunter-gatherers, then farmers, then city builders, then empires. Yet these sites stand outside the sequence, appearing suddenly, without the gradual accumulation of simpler forms. Gobekli Tepe rose fully formed, Puma Punku defies primitive tools, Malta's temples appear without clear precursors. Each is like an island rising abruptly from the ocean, hinting at a submerged continent of knowledge we cannot see. The possibility emerges that human history has not been a slow climb, but a series of abrupt awakenings, each one separated by long silences of forgetting. Myth often fills these silences with images of giants, gods, or culture bringers who bestow knowledge upon humanity. In Greek lore, Prometheus steals fire from the heavens to give to mankind. In Sumerian myths, the Apkallu rise from the waters, part fish, part human, bringing civilization to the people. In the Popol Vuh, the gods shape humans again and again until they are satisfied. These stories may not describe literal beings, but may encode memories of transmissions, moments when fragments of knowledge survived catastrophe and seeded the next age. If this is true, then sites like Pumapunku or Malta are not beginnings but survivals, remnants of a knowledge carried forward just enough to leave a mark before fading again. Skeptics argue that human ingenuity alone can account for these feats, that determination and time explain what seems impossible, and indeed to underestimate human creativity is a mistake. But the scale, the precision, and the sudden appearance of advanced techniques without precursors remain troubling. One can imagine a forgotten age of experimentation, a laboratory of civilizations erased by flood, by quake, by fire, leaving only a few structures strong enough to withstand millennia. What we see today may be less the first attempts of new societies than the final echoes of old ones. The ocean reinforces this possibility with its silence. Beneath the waters near Cuba, in 2001, sonar scans revealed geometric patterns resembling streets, walls, and pyramids nearly 2,000 feet below the surface. Though debate continues about whether these are natural formations or man-made ruins, the suggestion alone unsettles. If they are ruins, they predate recorded history by far, submerged when seas were hundreds of feet lower. The ocean has swallowed so much of our past that what is visible on land may only be fragments, the tip of an iceberg whose base remains unseen. The idea that civilization may be cyclical rather than linear is echoed in ancient philosophies. Hindu cosmology speaks of vast cycles called yugas, where humanity rises and declines repeatedly over tens of thousands of years. The Greeks spoke of golden, silver, bronze, and iron ages, each one a decline from a former greatness. Mayan timekeeping envisioned great cycles ending in destruction and renewal. These traditions, separated by geography and language, converge on the same unsettling thought: that what we call the beginning of history is merely one turn of a wheel that has turned many times before. What if the wheel turned after a cataclysm 12,000 years ago, when ice sheets melted and sea levels rose by over 100 meters? What if coastal civilizations, whose cities now lie drowned, carried knowledge forward only in fragments? In that vision, sites like Malta or Göbekli Tepe are not anomalies, but survivors, roots of an older tree whose trunk has been cut away. Our current era, with its cities and machines, may be only the latest branch, destined one day to fall and be forgotten in turn. This possibility unsettles because it places our present in perspective. If we are not the first, then we may not be the last. If civilizations have risen and fallen before, then our achievements are not final, but temporary, fragile, destined perhaps to be buried beneath soil and sea for future ages to rediscover as puzzle pieces without context. One can imagine distant generations, thousands of years hence, unearthing fragments of our cities, marveling at our machines without understanding, debating whether we truly existed or whether the ruins are myths made stone. Against this vision stands the orthodox view, which insists on linear progress and the authority of established timelines. To question it is to step into uncertainty, to risk being dismissed as speculative, ungrounded, or even irrational. Yet the stones themselves do not fit comfortably into that order. They resist containment, offering no clear answers, only questions that refuse to be silenced. Perhaps the discomfort they provoke is itself a clue, that our need for certainty blinds us to the possibility of a deeper, more complex history. The silence of the earth may not be emptiness, but a deliberate withholding. Just as myths carry truths in symbols, perhaps the planet carries truths in ruins, releasing them slowly, fragment by fragment, when the time is right. Each discovery, Göbekli Tepe, Pumapunku, Yonaguni, Dwarka, is like a stone surfacing from beneath the tide, hinting at a vast architecture beneath. But the whole remains concealed, as if to reveal it all at once would overwhelm. What we are left with are glimpses, enough to disturb certainty, enough to awaken wonder, but not enough to resolve the riddle. The night drifts deeper, and the thought persists like a whisper in the dark. What if the earth is not merely a stage for human history, but a participant in it, shaping what is remembered and what is forgotten? What if the silence is intentional, the concealment a form of protection? In that case, the ruins we see are not the story itself, but the shadows of something far greater, an echo of civilizations beneath our feet, waiting in the earth's memory, veiled until the cycle turns again. There are landscapes where the ground seems to breathe with secrets, where the contours of hills and valleys hint at forms not born of nature alone. In Central America, under the dense green canopy of the jungle, shadows of ancient cities still linger, their outlines revealed only when the forest is peeled back by LiDAR scans. Pyramids rise in silence, plazas stretch wide, causeways cut across terrain, all swallowed by roots and vines until technology allowed us to see again what had been hidden. The Maya, once thought to be scattered tribes, are now revealed as builders of sprawling urban networks. Yet their sudden rise, their inexplicable mastery of mathematics and astronomy, and their equally abrupt collapse remain wrapped in questions. Did they inherit fragments from an older world? Did knowledge pass down to them from those who had walked the earth in forgotten ages? The strangeness of Mesoamerican ruins deepens when viewed alongside myths. The Popol Vuh tells of repeated creations and destructions, of worlds made and unmade. Gods shaped men of clay, of wood, of maize, each attempt swept away until one endured. These myths, like those from Mesopotamia or Greece, pulse with the rhythm of cycles, as if human memory itself insists that history is not a straight line, but a wheel. The pyramids of Teotihuacan, their alignments echoing celestial patterns, seem to embody this rhythm. No texts from their builders survive, yet the Avenue of the Dead, the Pyramid of the Sun, and the Pyramid of the Moon all speak of a cosmology vast in scale. Some suggest they were designed as a map of the solar system, with sizes and distances reflected in stone. If so, then the builders possessed knowledge beyond their supposed age, knowledge whose source is not easily explained. The enigma is mirrored in South America, where the Nazca lines stretch across desert plains, visible only from the sky. Figures of animals, spirals, and vast geometric shapes etched into the ground raise questions that remain unanswered. Were they offerings to gods above? Calendars mapped onto Earth? Signals to beings beyond? Each explanation feels incomplete, each theory too narrow for the immensity of the lines themselves. Like whispers in the desert, they hint at a relationship with the sky, a dialogue with forces beyond the human, perhaps echoing fragments of knowledge carried from older ages now forgotten. In North America, mounds rise from the soil, their shapes aligned with solstices and equinoxes. The Great Serpent Mound of Ohio coils across the landscape in curves that match celestial events, its head aligned with the summer solstice sunset. These constructions, often dismissed as primitive, reveal a sensitivity to the cosmos, a mapping of sky onto Earth. Such patterns repeat worldwide, as if ancient builders across continents were following a script too vast to be coincidence. From Stonehenge to Chaco Canyon, from the alignments of the Giza pyramids to the geoglyphs of South America, the same question emerges. Why this obsession with the sky? Why invest immense labor into aligning Earth with stars, unless the stars themselves held memories, warnings, or promises from times before? One theory, whispered through comparative myth and controversial research, suggests that the sky preserves not only order, but trauma. Ancient cultures recorded patterns of stars, but also stories of catastrophe, fires from the heavens, floods unleashed, ages ended by cosmic events. The Younger Dryas period, beginning around 12,800 years ago, has been linked by some researchers to the impact of comet fragments. Evidence of sudden cooling, massive extinctions, and black mats of carbon at archaeological sites point to a world plunged into chaos. If such an event struck, it would have destroyed societies, erased coastlines, and forced survivors into myth. The stories of gods unleashing fire, of floods that consumed the world, may not be allegories but encoded memory of an age-ending catastrophe. The alignments of ancient monuments may be more than calendars. They may be warnings, preserving sky maps of when disaster struck or when it might return. The official view, cautious and precise, resists these interpretations. Mainstream archaeology argues that alignments are symbolic, that myths exaggerate, that catastrophes may have been local rather than global. Yet the persistence of the same motifs across continents remains difficult to dismiss. Why do civilizations separated by oceans tell of floods, fire from the sky, golden ages followed by collapse? Why do their monuments fix so intensely upon the heavens, if not to anchor memory in something enduring? Stone survives where words fade. Stars endure where cities fall. Perhaps the ancients, wiser in silence than we admit, chose to write their warnings not in books, but in landscapes, aligning their architecture with the sky so that even when memory failed, the earth itself would remember. If this is true, then the ruins we walk among today are not only remnants of ritual or governance, but archives, inscriptions too vast to read in one glance. The Avenue of the Dead may be a memory of disaster encoded in stone. The Serpent Mound may be a reminder of cycles written upon the land. The Nazca lines may be signals not to gods, but to ourselves, a map of survival etched into desert earth. Such interpretations are unsettling because they transform ruins from curiosities into messages. And if they are messages, then the question becomes, for whom? Were they written for us across millennia or for themselves, as a way to hold on to memory when collapse was inevitable? The deeper one follows this thought, the more fragile our sense of permanence feels. If civilizations rose before and encoded their warnings in stone, then they too may have believed themselves unshakable, only to vanish beneath water, jungle, or sand. Their silence may not be ignorance, but resignation, an understanding that every age passes. In this vision, human history becomes a palimpsest, each cycle writing over the last, fragments of older words still bleeding through. To walk among ruins is to glimpse these older inscriptions, not to understand them fully, but to feel the weight of their persistence. The cycle turns again in the present. We live in cities of glass and steel. We map the stars with satellites. We believe ourselves the pinnacle of progress. Yet the ruins beneath jungles, the alignments etched into deserts, the scars of ancient catastrophes whisper otherwise. Perhaps we too are only a chapter, destined to be buried and remembered in fragments, our warnings left in materials future ages may not recognize. The silence of the past becomes a mirror for our own fragility, reflecting a truth difficult to face. That what is built may fall, and what is remembered may be forgotten. The night stretches long, and in its stillness one feels the earth's weight pressing not only with stone, but with memory. Cities hidden beneath forests, lines drawn in deserts, mounds coiled across plains, all speak in a language beyond words, a script written by civilizations who knew they were impermanent. They pass their memory forward, not in certainty, but in silence, leaving only enough for us to wonder, to question, to sense the vastness beneath our feet. And in that silence, the question lingers. Are we the inheritors of their warnings, or merely the next to be forgotten? There are nights when the air itself feels like an archive, thick with echoes too faint for words. The human mind turns then to mysteries that refuse to rest, anomalies that linger in the archaeological record like fractures in a mirror. Among them, one puzzle presses more deeply than most. How much of what we call knowledge today is this echo of something older, passed down not through books, but through fragments, whispers, distortions? When one looks closely, pieces of evidence seem to surface like bones rising through soil after rain, suggesting that humanity's genius may not always be invention, but remembrance. The Antikythera mechanism is one such fragment, dragged from a shipwreck off a Greek island at the turn of the 20th century. Corroded, encrusted, almost unrecognizable, it was dismissed at first as debris. Yet when cleaned and studied, it revealed gears of astonishing intricacy, a mechanical computer built over 2,000 years ago, capable of predicting eclipses, planetary motions, and celestial cycles. Nothing like it should have existed in that era. Its precision rivaled instruments that would not appear again until the Renaissance. Scholars debate whether it was a singular marvel, a product of genius lost with its maker, or evidence of an entire tradition of engineering that vanished into the sea. If one such device survived by chance, how many others dissolved into salt and silence? The mechanism feels less like a relic of invention and more like an orphaned voice, hinting at an older knowledge that had already been forgotten once before. The mystery deepens when one considers ancient maps. The Piri Reis chart, drawn in the early 16th century, displays coastlines of South America with surprising accuracy, and, most troublingly, outlines of Antarctica free of ice. If genuine, these coastlines reflect conditions that last existed thousands of years ago, long before conventional history allows for seafaring civilizations. The map's creator admitted it was compiled from older sources, copies of copies reaching back into time. What were these sources? What hands first traced those lines? If Antarctica was indeed mapped before ice covered it, then the cartographers belonged to a world we no longer recognize, a civilization capable of reaching and recording places we only rediscovered in modern times. Such fragments disturb the neat lines of progress. They suggest that humanity does not simply accumulate knowledge, but also loses it, forgets it, buries it. And when forgotten, the knowledge does not disappear entirely but re-emerges in strange forms, half-remembered, misunderstood, dressed in myth. Ancient cultures spoke of knowledge descending from the sky, from gods or watchers, from beings who came to teach. The Sumerians wrote of the Apkallu, semi-divine sages rising from the waters to bring civilization. The Greeks told of Prometheus, who gave fire to humanity. The Dogon people of Mali preserved complex astronomical knowledge, including details of the Sirius star system, long before telescopes. How much of this is coincidence? How much transmission? How much inheritance from a time when the stars were mapped with a clarity now lost? The question unsettles because it blurs the boundaries between myth and science, between story and evidence. When the Dogon describe Sirius B, a star invisible to the naked eye, are they repeating an impossible coincidence or preserving fragments of knowledge older than history? When the Mayans track Venus with precision, aligning architecture to its cycles, are they simply diligent observers or inheritors of a system already ancient in their time? Myth becomes less like fantasy and more like a form of memory, encoded in narrative to outlast the silence of collapse. If this is true, then every story of gods teaching mankind may be a distorted remembrance of a prior age of knowledge, half buried beneath catastrophe. Opposition to such interpretations comes swiftly. Academics argue that oral traditions can distort, that coincidences accumulate, that human ingenuity explains even the most astonishing feats. To some degree, this is true, yet the anomalies persist, refusing to dissolve into neat explanations. The Antikythera mechanism remains too advanced for its time. The Piri Reis map contains details that should not exist. The Dogon knowledge provokes more questions than answers. Dismissing these as chance feels less like resolution and more like avoidance, a refusal to step into the deeper uncertainty these fragments suggest. The thought of cycles returns here with force. Perhaps knowledge is not always built anew but is remembered, resurfacing like ruins beneath jungle or seabed. When collapse comes, knowledge scatters. Some is lost entirely, some survives in myth, some lingers in fragments like the Antikythera gears or maps traced from older charts. Then, when the cycle turns, humanity rediscovers pieces of what was once known, not as inheritance, but as revelation. The past becomes our future, and the future is merely the past remembered. This vision unsettles the very foundation of what we call progress. If knowledge can be lost, if civilizations greater than ours have fallen, then our own achievements are fragile, provisional. The skyscrapers and satellites of today may be tomorrow's ruins, misinterpreted by future ages who piece together fragments without context. They may debate whether we truly existed, just as we debate whether ancient builders could have raised stones weighing hundreds of tons. They may stumble upon fragments of technology they cannot replicate, marvel at alignments they cannot explain, wonder whether myths of our time conceal truths they will never fully uncover. The thought echoes like a warning in the night. We imagine ourselves unique, yet perhaps we are only another cycle, destined to be erased and remembered in fragments. Our machines may one day corrode into silence. Our maps may survive only as copies in strange hands. Our myths may carry distorted echoes of what we thought we knew. And those who come after may ask the same questions we ask today. Who built these ruins? Who mapped these skies? Who encoded this knowledge into stories that outlived stone? Perhaps this is the true continuity, not progress, but recurrence. Knowledge appears, vanishes, and reappears, carried forward like a flame shielded against the wind. Each age believes itself the first to hold it, the first to grasp its power, but each is only a custodian, temporary, fragile. The flame may dim, but it does not die. It flickers in myth, in ruins, in fragments of mechanisms found in shipwrecks, in maps traced from older charts, in stories told beneath the stars. To walk through history is not to march in a line, but to circle back, again and again, to questions that never fully fade. And so the silence deepens. Beneath the sea, beneath the soil, beneath the myths, something waits. Not to be discovered in its entirety, not to be revealed at once, but to be remembered piece by piece when the time is right. The Antikythera mechanism, the Piri Reis map, the knowledge of the Dogon, these are not answers, but reminders. Reminders that our story is larger than we know, that memory is older than history, that what lies beneath our feet may be greater than what stands above. The night holds its breath, and in that stillness one feels the weight of forgotten ages pressing gently but firmly upon the present. A question lingers, soft as a whisper but sharp as stone. Are we building the future, or only recalling fragments of a past too vast to comprehend? And if so, what else lies hidden, waiting to resurface when the earth decides to loosen its grip? Beneath the surface of history, in the places where silence feels almost tangible, there lingers a disquieting thought. Perhaps what is hidden is not only stone and ruin, but entire dimensions of knowledge lost to time. When one considers the vastness of what has already slipped beyond reach, the drowned cities, the collapsed temples, the forgotten mechanisms, the mind drifts further into the possibility that civilizations of the past may have mastered not only material, but immaterial forces. In fragments scattered across traditions, there are whispers of sound and vibration, of resonance and frequency shaping both stone and spirit. To dismiss these as superstition is easy, yet the persistence of such motifs suggests that something deeper may lie beneath. In the Great Pyramid of Giza, explorers once reported strange acoustic effects, sounds carrying in ways unnatural, whispers magnified, tones resonating as though the stone itself were singing. The chambers of the pyramid, with their precise dimensions, may not have been designed solely for tombs or rituals, but for resonance. Some researchers have speculated that the geometry of the pyramid focuses energy, creating conditions for altered states of mind. Others dismiss this as fantasy, but the precision of the architecture remains troubling. Why carve immense passages into limestone with such accuracy, if not for a purpose beyond the obvious? The pyramid endures not only as a monument, but as an enigma, its silence suggesting a forgotten science of vibration. The Hippodrome of Hal Saflieni in Malta offers another echo of this mystery. Within its carved chambers, sound frequencies resonate in ways that affect the body itself. A voice speaking at certain pitches is amplified and felt in the bones, as though the stone were alive with sound. Modern acousticians confirm these effects, yet their purpose remains unknown. Were these chambers designed to create states of trance? To amplify ritual speech into something that could be felt as much as heard? If so, then the builders understood not only stone, but the invisible forces that move through it. And if such knowledge once existed, how much of it has been lost, drowned with cities, buried with temples, remembered only in myths of sound-shaping creation? Across the world, myths describe the power of sound as the origin of existence itself. In Hindu tradition, the syllable Om is said to be the vibration from which the universe arises. In the Gospel of John, creation begins with the Word. In ancient Egyptian texts, Ta brings the world into being through speech. The Maya spoke of gods shaping humans by words and breath. Different cultures, distant in space and time, converge upon the same image, sound as a force, vibration as the root of reality. If these are merely metaphors, they are strangely consistent. If they are memories, they may hint at a science of sound lost to time, a science that could move stone, alter consciousness, or open perception. Consider also the enigmatic structures of Stonehenge. Beyond its astronomical alignments, its circular arrangement of stones produces acoustic effects, amplifying voices and instruments, creating a resonance that transforms ritual into immersion. Was this merely symbolic, or did the builders understand something about how sound interacts with space? Some archaeologists suggest that Stonehenge functioned as a prehistoric concert hall, but others argue it was designed to alter the state of those within, merging sound, space, and spirit. The same motifs appear in Chavin de Huantar in Peru, where underground galleries produce disorienting echoes and animal sounds carved into stone seem to awaken when instruments are played. Again and again, the evidence suggests an ancient obsession with sound, as if builders were pursuing something more profound than ritual spectacle. Skeptics point to coincidence, to the natural acoustic properties of stone. Yet the repetition across continents, the precision of design, the persistence of myths, all argue otherwise. If these effects were accidental, why do they appear in so many places, across cultures separated by oceans? Why does myth so consistently link sound with creation, with transformation, with power? One begins to sense that these cultures may have been tapping into something fundamental, something modern science is only now beginning to rediscover: the ability of frequency to shape matter, to alter perception, to carry memory. Modern experiments in cymatics, where sound waves produce patterns in sand, water, or dust, reveal striking geometries, mandala-like forms emerging from invisible vibrations. The ancients may not have had our machines, but they had stone, water, voice, and intuition. Perhaps they discovered that sound could shape not only patterns in dust, but also the alignment of blocks, the state of consciousness, the memory of a culture. If so, then ruins like the Hippogem or the Great Pyramid are not merely monuments, but instruments, tuned to resonate with forces we no longer recognize. And yet this thought collides with the silence of the orthodox view. Archaeology insists on the material, on artifacts that can be measured and dated. Sound leaves no fossil, vibration leaves no shard. The absence of direct evidence becomes dismissal, and the possibility of a lost science of resonance is reduced to speculation. But the absence itself is telling. Knowledge built upon invisible forces would vanish easily, leaving only myths and anomalies as traces. Perhaps the very invisibility of this science is why it has remained hidden, preserved in myth, encoded in ritual, remembered not as fact, but as story. The persistence of this story across time is striking. From the Hebrew Psalms describing the voice that shakes the earth, to Tibetan chanting designed to alter states of consciousness, to Aboriginal song lines that map landscapes through sound, the motif repeats. Sound carries creation, memory, power. Each tradition may be a survival of an older truth, fractured but enduring. Perhaps sound was once the bridge between material and immaterial, between stone and sky, between civilization and cosmos. And perhaps those who mastered it could do things that now seem impossible: move massive blocks, carve stone with precision, align monuments with the heavens not only visually but vibrationally. The thought unsettles because it suggests that civilization is not defined solely by material remains, but by the immaterial, the sciences of perception, of resonance, of consciousness itself. If so, then the greatest civilizations of the past may not be the ones that left the tallest pyramids or the widest avenues, but the ones that tuned themselves most deeply to the harmonics of existence. And if they vanished, then what we inherit are only echoes, the stones without the sound, the instruments without the players, the myths without the science that birthed them. The night carries this thought softly, like a vibration too low to hear but strong enough to feel. Beneath the soil, beneath the ruins, beneath the myths, there may lie not only forgotten cities, but forgotten frequencies, not only stones, but songs. And perhaps, when the cycle turns again, these songs will resurface, remembered not as myth, but as knowledge once more. For now, they remain in silence, waiting in the earth's memory, carried in the faint resonance of chambers, in the whisper of myths, in the stillness of the night. And the question drifts like a vibration across time. What if the greatest civilization is hidden not in the stones beneath our feet, but in the resonance that once made them sing? Sometimes the silence of the earth feels heavier than its stone. There are places where absence itself seems carved into the landscape, where what is missing speaks louder than what remains. In such moments, one is drawn not only to ruins and relics, but to the voids between them, gaps in knowledge that throb like unanswered questions. The deeper we look into these voids, the more we sense that civilizations may have flourished in ways that defy the narrow categories of archaeology, leaving behind fragments so strange they resist fitting into the story we tell ourselves. Consider the enigma of giants. In the mythologies of nearly every continent, figures larger than human scale stride across memory. The Nephilim of Hebrew texts, the Titans of Greek myth, the Jutnar of Norse sagas, the Rakshasas of Indian epics, all describe beings immense in power and stature. Indigenous traditions of North America speak of giant ancestors, builders of mounds and guardians of earthworks. To the modern mind, these are allegories, symbolic beings embodying forces of chaos or creation. Yet whispers persist of bones unearthed, of skeletons larger than ordinary men, reported in newspapers of the 19th century before vanishing into obscurity. Were these errors, hoaxes, or fragments of a story suppressed because it strained the bounds of accepted history? Even if giants never walked the earth in literal form, the persistence of their image points to a truth. Humanity remembers an age of disproportion, of beings beyond our scale, whether physical or metaphorical. Perhaps these myths recall not literal giants, but memories of civilizations whose achievements felt larger than life, whose mastery of stone and sky dwarfed later societies. To walk among the trilithons of Baalbek, to stand before the walls of Sacsayhuaman, is to feel small, as though these works were raised by hands larger than our own. The myth of giants may be a way of encoding this dissonance, translating the impossibility of such works into stories of beings vast enough to accomplish them. The void also opens in the enigma of sudden disappearances. The Indus Valley civilization, sprawling and sophisticated, with plumbing and urban planning centuries ahead of its time, collapsed mysteriously. Its script remains undeciphered, its people dispersed, its knowledge dissolved. The Olmec, who carved colossal heads with features distinct and enigmatic, faded almost without record, leaving questions unanswered. Even the Maya, whose cities once teemed with life and light, fell into silence long before Europeans arrived. Each of these collapses is explained by climate, by war, by disease, yet something in their abruptness feels unresolved. What if these collapses were not only endings, but erasures, part of the cycle that buries civilizations until only fragments remain? Myth often preserves what archaeology cannot. In Norse tradition, the world has ended before, consumed by fire and flood, reborn again in cycles. In Hindu cosmology, vast ages stretch across eons, with knowledge rising and falling like the tides. Plato's tale of Atlantis tells not just of a city drowned, but of knowledge lost, a warning that civilization itself is fragile. These myths do not stand alone. They resonate with geological evidence of abrupt climate shifts, with evidence of comet impacts, with the scars of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Again and again, the Earth itself has reshaped the stage of human history, sweeping away what once seemed eternal. Perhaps what we dismiss as allegory is in truth the residue of memory, the only way survivors could preserve fragments of what had been. The orthodox view resists such interpretations, insisting on evidence that can be measured and verified. And yet, fragments of the impossible remain. In Lake Titicaca, at nearly 13,000 feet above sea level, ruins lie beneath the water. Roads, walls, steps carved into stone. Who built them, and when, remains unclear. If they predate the rise of the lake, then they belong to a world older than we acknowledge. Off the coast of Japan, at Yonaguni, steps and terraces lie beneath the waves, dismissed by some as natural, but by others as unmistakably human. In the Bay of Cambay in India, sonar surveys revealed what may be city streets and walls, now submerged, possibly older than any known civilization. Each site may be debated endlessly, but together they form a chorus of anomalies, voices rising from beneath the waters to disturb the silence of accepted history. What if these are not isolated curiosities but fragments of a larger story? A story of civilizations older than we admit, swept away by waters, earthquakes, and time. What if the earth itself is the true historian, keeping memory in its strata, revealing it slowly, unevenly, like a whisper repeated across ages? The thought expands further when one considers the nature of forgetting. Human memory is fragile. Without writing, knowledge evaporates within generations. Even with writing, libraries can burn, tablets can break, archives can drown. How much knowledge has been lost in flames like those of Alexandria, in floods like those of Mesopotamia, in earthquakes that shattered cities? And if so much has been lost in recorded history, how much more was erased in ages before writing began? Perhaps what we call the beginning of civilization is not a beginning at all, but a return, the reawakening of memory after long silence. If this is true, then our present becomes less unique. We are not the culmination of history, but a moment in its cycle, fragile and provisional. Our skyscrapers, our satellites, our archives may one day be ruins and myths, misinterpreted by future ages, who will wonder, as we do, how such things were possible. They may tell stories of giants who built our towers, of gods who gave us machines, of a civilization drowned in fire or water. To them, our world may appear as enigmatic as Baalbek or Sacsayhuaman appears to us. This thought is not comforting, yet it is strangely grounding. It reminds us that permanence is an illusion, that civilization itself is as mortal as its makers. To walk among ruins is to hear this truth whispered by stone. All that is built will fall, and all that is known will be forgotten unless carried in myth, in fragments, in silence. Perhaps this is why ancient peoples invested so heavily in stone, in alignments with the sky, in stories encoded in symbols. They knew that cities crumble, but stars endure. They knew that paper burns, but stone can whisper across millennia. They sought to leave memory not for themselves, but for us, and for those who will come after us when our time too has passed. The night stretches long, and in its stillness the mind drifts to the weight of forgotten ages. Beneath the soil, beneath the waters, beneath the silence, there may lie civilizations greater than our own, their voices muted, their stories half buried. We inherit fragments, enough to disturb, enough to awaken wonder, but never enough to resolve the riddle. The earth holds its silence close, as if guarding a truth too immense for one age to bear. And so the question remains, carried softly into the dark. Are we walking upon the graves of giants, or upon the ashes of civilizations that once were as vast, as fragile, and as certain of their permanence as we are today? There are ruins that speak in whispers, and there are absences that thunder louder than any monument. When silence deepens, one begins to notice the spaces where something should exist, but does not. The missing links, the vanished texts, the unanswered questions that cling like shadows. In those shadows, one wonders whether the earth itself has chosen what to reveal and what to withhold, as if history were not merely lost, but curated. What lies beneath our feet may not only be forgotten civilizations, but entire libraries of thought, erased so thoroughly that only fragments slip through the cracks of time. The burning of the Library of Alexandria is one of the most potent images of this erasure. In that vast archive, it is said, were texts from Egypt, Greece, Mesopotamia, and lands beyond, scrolls gathered from ships that docked in the harbor, a compendium of the ancient world's memory. Its destruction, whether by fire, neglect, or repeated losses across centuries, became a symbol of knowledge reduced to ash. But perhaps what is most haunting is not what was burned, but what those texts represented. The possibility of older knowledge preserved, wisdom copied from civilizations already gone. If even fragments of a forgotten world were contained in those scrolls, then their loss is not only academic, but existential, a severing of continuity. Other losses echo with the same force. The Mayan codices, burned by missionaries who saw them as pagan, were repositories of astronomical cycles and mythological memory. Only 4 remain, fragile survivors of a library once vast. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets from Sumer and Akkad speak of floods, kings before the flood, and knowledge bestowed by beings from the deep. Yet the majority of such tablets have been shattered, looted, or left unread in archives. What if the tablets we do possess are only the faintest murmur of what was once inscribed? What if civilizations far older than Sumer passed fragments of their memory forward, only for those fragments to be erased again and again? The myth of Atlantis hovers here like a ghost. Plato described it not as a dream, but as a tradition passed to him through Solon, who in turn heard it from Egyptian priests. The story told of a great island civilization, advanced in knowledge, drowned by catastrophe 9,000 years before Plato's time. Mainstream historians dismiss it as allegory, a moral tale dressed as history. Yet geological evidence of abrupt sea level rise at the end of the last ice age, the discovery of submerged ruins, and the persistence of flood myths across the world lend the story a strange resilience. Perhaps Atlantis is not a literal island, but a memory of civilization swept away, remembered under one name, but lived under many. Perhaps the silence around it is not because it never existed, but because the earth itself closed over it, burying it beneath water and time. One can feel this curated silence most strongly in the gaps between what we know and what we intuitively sense must have been. How did humans leap so quickly from hunter-gatherers to builders of megaliths, astronomers, and city-makers? How did mathematics, agriculture, and language emerge almost fully formed in different places, as if seeds were planted rather than gradually evolved? Some scholars argue that the transition was abrupt because survivors of older cultures carried fragments of their knowledge forward. If so, then our beginnings were not beginnings at all, but inheritances, fragments of a story too vast to tell. The opposition to this view insists on gradualism, on the slow accumulation of tools, trade, and trial. Yet gradualism struggles to explain anomalies, maps showing coastlines before they should have been known, mechanisms too advanced for their time, monuments aligned with stars invisible to the naked eye. Gradualism explains what is continuous, but it falters when confronted with the discontinuous, the sudden, the inexplicable. The silence of history is full of such discontinuities, places where something immense seems to have been cut out. Perhaps the most haunting of these gaps is the absence of continuity in human memory itself. Archaeologists measure bones, tools, and potsherds, but human minds carry stories, and stories survive even when material culture does not. In Aboriginal traditions of Australia, tales speak of landscapes now underwater, memories stretching back tens of thousands of years, verified by geology. These stories suggest that memory itself may be older than archaeology allows, that oral tradition can carry truth across unimaginable spans of time. If so, then myths of floods, giants, or lost civilizations may not be fantasies, but faint echoes of realities older than we dare admit. And yet, if such echoes survive, why is the record so broken, so scattered? Perhaps forgetting is not failure, but design. Some traditions speak of knowledge that is too dangerous to be preserved whole, wisdom that must be concealed until the right age returns. The Book of Enoch tells of angels who shared forbidden knowledge with humans, punished for revealing what should remain hidden. In Hindu texts, knowledge expands and contracts with the cycles of yugas, forbidden in some ages, flourishing in others. Even in modern times, secrecy has been a constant. Societies hoarding wisdom, libraries locked, knowledge suppressed. Perhaps what we call absence is in truth concealment, deliberate or cosmic, ensuring that some truths remain hidden until the cycle turns. If this is true, then the earth itself may be part of the concealment. What better way to erase a civilization than to drown it beneath the sea, to bury it under volcanic ash, to fold it into tectonic shifts? What better way to preserve only fragments than to scatter them as myths, mechanisms, maps, and ruins? Each anomaly becomes not an accident, but a breadcrumb, a trace left behind in a silence otherwise total. We are meant to glimpse, to wonder, but not to know fully, not yet. This possibility unsettles because it transforms history into a labyrinth of intention. What we perceive as loss may be part of a pattern. What we call chance may be a design too vast to perceive. The silence between ruins becomes as meaningful as the ruins themselves, the gaps between texts as loud as the texts. In this vision, the greatest civilization on Earth may not only be hidden beneath our feet, but hidden by intention, preserved in fragments so that we approach it only slowly, with humility, never in certainty. The night deepens, and in its silence one feels the immensity of absence pressing down like a weight. Libraries burned, scrolls lost, tablets shattered, stories erased. All these are not merely accidents, but part of a pattern too immense to dismiss. What has been hidden may be waiting. What has been erased may still echo. What has been silenced may one day speak again. Until then, we walk among fragments, piecing together a story that refuses to be whole. And so the question lingers, heavy, yet strangely tender. Is the silence of history an accident of time, or a deliberate veil drawn across truths too immense for us to hold? Beneath our feet, perhaps, lies not only what was lost, but what was hidden on purpose, waiting for an age when we are ready to remember. There are moments when the earth feels less like ground and more like a vault, sealed, heavy, impenetrable. Beneath mountains and seas, beneath the very fields where crops sway in the wind, lie secrets too vast to catalogue. It is tempting to think of lost civilizations only in terms of stone and monument, of drowned avenues and toppled temples, but silence also hides within the sciences themselves, within mysteries of the natural world that ancient peoples may have grasped long before we began to rediscover them. To look into these mysteries is to feel that our ancestors may not have been ignorant, but rather custodians of knowledge stripped away by time. One such enigma lingers in the fields of astronomy. Megalithic sites around the world show alignments too precise to be accidental. Stonehenge is not only a circle of stones, but a calendar of solstices and eclipses. The pyramids of Giza point to Orion's belt. The Temple of Angkor Wat in Cambodia maps the constellation Draco in stone. Across the Americas, from Chaco Canyon to Machu Picchu, buildings and pathways align with solstices, equinoxes, and lunar standstills. The question is not whether these cultures looked to the stars, they clearly did, but how much they knew and how they knew it. Were they merely diligent observers, recording the sky over centuries? Or were they inheriting systems of knowledge already ancient when they began? The enigma sharpens with the great year, the cycle of precession, a slow wobble of the Earth's axis that takes nearly 26,000 years to complete. Knowledge of precession is usually attributed to Hipparchus in the 2nd century BCE, yet hints of its awareness appear in far older traditions. The builders of Nabta Playa in Egypt aligned stones to mark solstices more than 6,000 years ago, and their arrangement may also indicate awareness of stellar shifts across millennia. The Hindu concept of yugas measures vast ages with uncanny similarity to precessional cycles. The Mayans tracked long counts that span thousands of years, hinting at a scale of time larger than daily life could demand. Could these be coincidences, or are they the residue of an ancient awareness of the great year, knowledge too vast to have been discovered repeatedly without some inheritance from an earlier source? If such knowledge existed, it would imply not merely observation, but continuity, generations preserving records across millennia. Yet continuity is fragile. Civilizations collapse, records are destroyed, oral traditions fracture. What survives are fragments, numbers inscribed in myth, alignments set into stone, stories of cycles and returns. Perhaps the ancients were not simply worshipping the stars, but encoding memory, leaving signposts for ages to come. In this vision, every megalith, every alignment is a message across time. Remember the cycles, for they govern not only the heavens but the fate of civilizations. The notion of cycles repeats in geology. Catastrophe, once dismissed as superstition, has re-emerged in scientific discourse. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests that fragments of a comet may have struck Earth 12,800 years ago, igniting wildfires, causing abrupt cooling, and unleashing floods that reshaped landscapes. Black mats of carbon, nanodiamonds, and layers of melt glass point to something extraordinary. If true, then humanity around that time endured devastation on a scale we can scarcely imagine. Was this the flood remembered in myths, the catastrophe that ended one age and forced survivors to begin again? If so, then the alignments, myths, and cycles preserved across cultures are not abstractions but warnings, memory encoded in stone and story so that we would not forget. Yet mainstream scholarship resists these conclusions. Alignments are often explained as symbolic, cycles as exaggerations, myths as allegory. To accept that ancient peoples knew of precession or tracked cosmic events across tens of thousands of years challenges the neat timeline of gradual progress. But the stones remain, precise and immovable, indifferent to interpretation. Their silence suggests that either coincidence piled upon coincidence with uncanny precision, or that we are missing something vast. The sense of absence grows deeper when one considers the mysteries of lost technologies. At sites like Baalbek, blocks weighing hundreds of tons rest upon foundations with a precision our machines would struggle to replicate. At Puma Punku, stone blocks bear drill holes and interlocking cuts as though shaped by machinery rather than stone tools. Orthodox archaeology attributes these to ingenuity, levers, and manpower, yet the scale and precision strain credulity. What if these were the remnants of technologies forgotten, knowledge of physics and engineering that vanished in collapse, leaving only impossible stones as testimony? The possibility becomes more haunting when paired with myth. In Sumer, the Apkallu brought knowledge of building and measurement. In Egypt, Thoth was said to have given the sciences. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl arrived as a teacher, bearing gifts of mathematics, astronomy, and agriculture. Across traditions, culture bringers emerge, impart knowledge, and vanish. Were these purely divine archetypes, or were they memories of survivors of older worlds, passing fragments forward after catastrophe? If so, then our sciences may be less invention than remembrance, rediscoveries of truths once known and lost. What does it mean, then, to live in a world built on fragments? It means that the story of humanity is not linear, but broken, stitched together by survivors who carried shards of memory forward. It means that ruins are not only the remains of buildings, but the remains of knowledge itself. It means that silence, heavy and impenetrable, is not ignorance but erasure. And if erasure is part of the cycle, then we too may be destined to fall, leaving only fragments for the future to misinterpret. There is something sobering in this vision, but also something strangely tender. To imagine forgotten civilizations is not to diminish ourselves, but to see our place more clearly, not as the apex, but as one iteration in a vast pattern of rise and collapse. Our skyscrapers may one day be as enigmatic as Baalbek's trilithons, our satellites as mysterious as the Antikythera mechanism. Future generations may argue over whether we truly knew what we knew, just as we argue over the ancients. And they too may walk among ruins, feeling the silence press upon them, sensing a greatness hidden beneath their feet. The night air is still, and in its stillness one feels the rhythm of cycles, like a distant tide. Stars wheel above, indifferent yet constant, their patterns shifting in slow arcs across ages. Beneath them, civilizations rise and fall. Knowledge is remembered and forgotten. Monuments are built and buried. The silence of the earth is not emptiness but memory, waiting for us to listen. And so the question returns, soft as a whisper yet heavy as stone. Are we gazing into the night sky as observers of its beauty, or as inheritors of warnings left by those who came before? Beneath our feet, beneath our silence, may lie not only their ruins but their messages, waiting for us to read before the cycle turns again. The earth has always carried scars, and sometimes those scars look less like wounds than like inscriptions. They speak in patterns too vast to be chance. Circles of stone, spirals etched into hillsides, labyrinths carved in rock faces that stretch from Britain to India, from Scandinavia to the Pacific. What if these shapes are not decoration, not idle artistry, but memory, encoded in forms meant to endure longer than language? When the silence of millennia descends, perhaps geometry itself becomes the library, each pattern a key left behind by civilizations who knew words would fail. Labyrinths, for instance, appear across continents, from the stone pathways of Crete to petroglyphs in North America. Their twisting paths may have symbolized journeys of the soul, but they also may preserve something older, a map of cycles, a reminder that progress is not a line, but a winding return. Spirals carved into megaliths at Newgrange in Ireland align with the winter solstice, the rising sun illuminating chambers once sealed by darkness. At that moment, the spiral becomes both art and calendar, both symbol and science. Across the world, the same spirals appear, in Malta, in Peru, in Australia, like echoes of a common language, older than any known tongue, a geometry of remembrance. The silence grows heavier when one turns to the alignment of sacred sites. It has been noted, controversially yet persistently, that many ancient monuments align not only with stars, but with each other across vast distances. From Giza to Easter Island, from Angkor to Nazca, patterns emerge that seem too deliberate for coincidence. Could these be remnants of a global knowledge system, a network of sacred geometry etched onto the earth itself? If so, then we must ask, who first drew this map, and when? Was it the work of separate cultures independently, or of an inheritance older than them all, carried across oceans in ages we no longer acknowledge? Opponents argue that alignments are coincidences, that patterns appear when one looks hard enough. Yet the persistence of geometry across continents, the recurrence of solstitial markers, the repeated use of circles, spirals, and grids suggest something more than accident. If independent cultures, separated by oceans, created the same symbols and structures, Then perhaps they were responding to a shared memory, fragments of knowledge carried through myth. The earth itself may have been the canvas, the sky the template, and geometry the bridge between them. What unsettles further is that many of these symbols and alignments appear linked to cycles of destruction and renewal. Myths speak of worlds destroyed by flood, by fire, by celestial upheaval. The Hopi tell of previous worlds ended by water and fire, with survivors carrying knowledge into the next. Hindu cosmology speaks of yugas, vast cycles of rising and falling ages. The Maya counted great Baktun cycles, measuring time not in years but in spans so vast they seem designed for civilizations rather than individuals. The recurrence of spirals, circles, and labyrinths across these cultures may not be art at all, but warnings, reminders that the world turns, collapses, and begins again. The younger Dryas impact hypothesis offers a scientific echo of these myths. Evidence suggests that comet fragments may have struck the Earth 12,800 years ago, triggering fires, floods, and a sudden cooling. If so, then myths of flood and fire are not allegories, but memories of trauma. Survivors, scattered and broken, may have carried fragments of knowledge forward, encoding them in symbols, rituals, and alignments. In this light, the spirals, labyrinths, and solstitial monuments are not simply religious but practical, a way to remember cycles, to anticipate catastrophe, to preserve what had been learned before the collapse. If this is true, then the silence of history is less an absence than a veil. What we dismiss as superstition may be memory. What we call coincidence may be continuity. The labyrinth becomes not a game, but a map. The spiral, not a doodle, but a cycle. The solstice alignment, not a curiosity, but a warning. The ruins beneath our feet are not inert. They are voices speaking across time, encoded in forms designed to survive when words and libraries burned. And yet, the orthodox view remains unmoved. To see global alignments is to risk accusation of pattern seeking. To suggest lost civilizations is to stray from the safety of evidence. But the stones do not care for skepticism. They endure, precise in their alignments, persistent in their forms. Their silence may be deliberate, a whisper too soft for those unwilling to listen. Or perhaps it is not silence at all, but language, one we no longer know how to read. The thought lingers that our own age, too, will one day be reduced to fragments. Our books will crumble, our data will vanish, our symbols will outlast us. What geometry will we leave behind? What alignments, what patterns will future eyes find in our ruins? Will they wonder at the coincidence? Or will they sense, as we sense now, that nothing is ever truly new, that we are only part of a cycle of remembrance and forgetting, of symbols written and reinterpreted across ages? To walk among spirals carved into stone, to stand in chambers where solstice light pierces darkness, is to feel the weight of this question pressing like the dawn itself. Beneath the earth, beneath our feet, there may be not only ruins but messages left by civilizations who knew their time would end. They carved memory into geometry, silence into stone, warning into symbol, so that when we stood where they once stood, we too would remember that all ages pass, and all knowledge must be carried forward in forms that can endure. The night draws in, stars wheeling overhead, constellations shifting as they have for millennia. Their patterns reflect themselves in stone, in labyrinths, in spirals, in the silent alignments of monuments. And in that reflection, one feels the immensity of what has been lost and the persistence of what refuses to die. So the question lingers, soft but inescapable. Are the ruins beneath us mere remnants of forgotten builders, or are they the inscriptions of a greater memory, encoded in stone to survive catastrophe, waiting for us to read them before the cycle turns once more? There is a stillness at the edge of history, a pause that feels like the breath drawn before a revelation too vast to speak. By now, the fragments, the drowned ruins, the anomalous artifacts, the whispered myths circle us like constellations. Each one glimmers, separate yet suggestive of a larger pattern, a design hidden behind the veil of silence. To follow these fragments is to sense that the story of civilization is not a line, but a cycle, not an ascent, but a rhythm of rise and collapse. And beneath our feet, deeper than stone, lies the unsettling truth that what has been will be again, that what we call modernity is only another turn of a wheel that has spun for ages beyond memory. The echoes of this wheel appear not only in myth, but in the earth itself. Geological records bear witness to sudden shifts, cataclysms that wipe clean the canvas of human life. Volcanic eruptions like Toba 74,000 years ago may have nearly extinguished humanity, reducing populations to a fragile remnant. Earthquakes, floods, and cosmic impacts have again and again reshaped the stage upon which civilizations stand. If our species is so vulnerable to nature, then how many times might we have risen before, only to be reduced to silence? How many cities, sciences, and philosophies may have been swallowed by the ground or the sea, leaving behind only the faintest traces we now mistake for beginnings? This thought grows heavier when one considers the suddenness with which civilizations can vanish. The Indus Valley left behind cities with plumbing systems unmatched for millennia, yet their script is undeciphered and their fate uncertain. The Hittites, once rulers of an empire, collapsed so completely that their very name was lost until rediscovered in tablets centuries later. The Maya, who tracked celestial cycles with astonishing precision, abandoned their cities to the jungle. If such losses occur in recorded history, with ruins still visible, how much more might have been erased in ages before writing, when memory depended only on voices and symbols? Myth, then, becomes less a tale of imagination than a vessel of memory. The cycle of yugas in Hindu tradition, the ages of gold, silver, bronze, and iron in Greek thought, the successive worlds of the Hopi, all describe a rhythm of rising and falling civilizations. These are not local stories, but global patterns, suggesting that humanity has long sensed its own impermanence, encoding the knowledge that what rises will fall, and what falls may rise again. Even the biblical refrain that "there is nothing new under the sun" echoes this truth, that all ages are repetitions of a greater cycle. The cycle is not only destruction, but forgetting. To lose a civilization is not only to lose its monuments, but its memory. Knowledge dissolves when the chain of transmission breaks, when languages die, when libraries burn. The Antikythera mechanism, isolated in a shipwreck, appears like a ghost of an entire scientific tradition. The Piri Rice map suggests charts copied from older sources now lost. Myths of flood and fire repeat too consistently to be dismissed as coincidence. Together they suggest that memory itself is fragile, and that silence is as much a force in history as invention. The opposition to such ideas insists on certainty. Progress is linear. Civilizations grow from simple to complex. Anomalies can be explained away, and yet the anomalies do not vanish. They remain as irritants, as reminders that our framework may not be as complete as we believe. The silence beneath our feet may not be ignorance, but erasure. And erasure is not always random. It may be part of the cycle itself, part of the rhythm of rise and collapse that ensures no civilization holds permanence. What if this rhythm is not merely natural but necessary? What if forgetting is the price of renewal, collapse the seedbed of new beginnings? Perhaps civilizations rise not to preserve themselves, but to pass fragments forward, leaving behind ruins, myths, and alignments for those who come after. In this vision, history is less a ladder than a spiral, always returning, always ascending in some ways, but always haunted by what was lost. This perspective casts our present in a different light. We imagine ourselves as the pinnacle of progress, with technologies, machines, and sciences unmatched by any before. Yet our fragility is plain. A solar storm could silence our satellites. A shift in climate could flood our cities. A comet, as in the Younger Dryas, could erase us in a night. If civilizations have risen before and been erased, then we are not immune. We too may be buried, our knowledge reduced to shards, our memory surviving only in myths future peoples will puzzle over. They may walk among the ruins of our skyscrapers, wonder at our satellites fallen from the sky, and tell stories of a world destroyed by fire and flood. This thought, though unsettling, carries also a strange calm. To know that we are part of a cycle is to recognize that impermanence is the law of all things. No civilization, however mighty, escapes silence, yet fragments endure. Symbols carved in stone, myths repeated across continents, alignments with the sky. These are the bridges across cycles, the threads that connect us to those who came before. Perhaps our task is not to preserve everything, but to leave behind enough, fragments that may guide those who come after when the wheel turns again. The silence beneath our feet, then, is not only loss, but inheritance. It is the echo of civilizations whose voices are gone, but whose whispers remain. It is the reminder that what is hidden is not gone forever, but waiting for the right time to be remembered. It is the weight of memory carried not in books, but in stone, in myth, in cycles of stars and earth. And in that silence lies the haunting truth. We are not the first, nor the last, but only one turn of a wheel that has spun since time immemorial. The night deepens, stars shifting in their slow arc, constellations older than any civilization casting their light upon the earth. Beneath them the ground lies heavy, veined with ruins, with fragments of memory, with civilizations hidden like roots beneath the soil. And as the silence thickens, a final question rises, soft as breath, yet vast as eternity. If the greatest civilization on earth lies hidden beneath our feet, is it lost to us forever, or is it only waiting for the next turning of the wheel, for the moment when memory returns and silence at last becomes song?